We need to stop telling these lies to boys and men, no matter what they were wearing, look like, characteristics, body type, sexual orientation, or what they identify as. We need to stop victim blaming and just listen. Be that person in their lives that finally show them respect, kindness, dignity, love, and support.
Hey everybody, Martin here from Johannesburg, South Africa. Same as John, honored to be here. What a privilege to be a part of this, and to Anna for all the work that she's done and research that she's done. Absolutely incredible. And it's time that we start highlighting the plight of men and boys, and start alleviating some of the suffering that these guys go through. So yeah, look forward to this, and I hope there's lots of interest and questions after.
Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Martin and I'm from MatrixMen, South Africa. MatrixMen is an organization that was founded in 2011, born out of my need to begin healing and begin supporting male survivors of sexual abuse. And that was kind of our focus for the first 12 years. Things have changed a little bit now, and it's such an honor to be able to be involved with this webinar, and to send in videos and what's happening down this southern point of the world. And I must say that doing the work with Anita was absolutely amazing. It was so empowering for me, because it was one of the rare occasions where I spoke about what had happened to me as a young boy, and somebody believed me and listened to me, and that was refreshing. And it's so beautiful to feel heard and understood. And that's exactly what Anita did when she was doing the research. Anyway, we went through a lot of stuff, and I think her eyes and her jaw dropped open when we were chatting, because South Africa, I don't know, we're known as the sex trafficking capital of the world, the human trafficking capital of the world, the rape capital of the world. We just have all the bad titles right now. We have a terrible government, an absolutely useless police force, but that's life, and we have to make do. And that's kind of where MPOs fitting, and we start closing up the gaps and supporting. So in South Africa, I mean, one of our recent studies was in 2016, where it was found that 7,500 boys were in, 7,500 boys were interviewed, 7,500 girls were interviewed, making them 13,200 and odd children. And they found that 33.9% of all girls had suffered some form of sexual abuse by age 16, and hold on to your seats, 36.8% of all boys had suffered some form of sexual abuse by age 16. The numbers here are incredibly high. And the reason why I emphasize the issues is because when we look at the services provided, they're all kind of set up on a gendered basis. So everything, when you walk in, you see the rape crisis centers, you go to the websites, look at the rape crisis centers, they all depict girls, they all talk about men as perpetrators, women as victims. And that's a big issue, because in fact we have more boys that are suffering sexual abuse in South Africa, and I believe around the world. I don't think the 1 in 6, 1 in 4 number cuts it anymore. We can't lie to ourselves anymore. And one of the issues that we believe it's lower around the world is because we're not looking at female perpetrated sexual violence on boys. In South Africa, 41% of our boy victims, are abused by females, 27% by both male and female, and 32% by men. Now, this doesn't make it good, it doesn't make it right, but what we're doing is we're excluding a huge chunk of victims, and we're not creating access to healing. We're not creating safe spaces for boys to be able to come out and talk about the issues that they face and suffer. I mean, when I was 16 years old, I walked into a rape crisis center and I was looking for support. And I looked around after I'd plucked up the courage. Believe you me, it took a lot of courage to walk in. I looked around at all the pictures on the walls, and they were all depicting women as victims, girls as victims, men as perpetrators. What I call the hairy fist poster, with the hairy fist dripping blood virtually in the foreground, and in the background a little girl or a woman cowering in the corner. And that wasn't my reality. My reality was that I was being raped by a woman, that I was being raped by men and sexually abused by men. And nobody spoke to that reality, and it kept me trapped until I was 45. when I saw a program on Oprah Winfrey. You all get one, all right? Sorry. By Oprah Winfrey, and she spoke to the 200 men, and I listened to these 200 men, and finally it dawned on me that I was a victim of rape and sexual abuse as a child. Never struck me as that before because nobody ever talks about it. So we need to start changing the narrative. We need to start being specific about the fact that boys are victims of sexual abuse, that girls are victims of sexual abuse. I mean, if we look at the sextortion scandals that are going on now, 52% of victims are boys. Because it's just easier to lure a boy in. You promise him, yeah, you can see my girl, my sister's titties, or whatever the case may be, and he's going to be like, wow, I want to see titties. You know, boys at 16 kind of do that sort of stuff. I mean, that's their hormones are popping. That's all so they're vulnerable. They are incredibly vulnerable. Yet so many of them commit suicide, and we need to start getting real and talking about what is actually happening. And the truth is, in a prior study that was done in South Africa amongst 256,000 children, which is massive, there were 13,915 boys that were 18 in the year of the study. And they were found that 44% of all boys had suffered sexual abuse by age 18. Now, the difference between the two is the one is 44%, the one is 16, because in 2007, the age of consent was changed in South Africa. It was dropped from 18 to 16. Terrible mistake, I believe, but anyway, what can we do? We just argue with the government, right? So we need to start getting real about telling the truth. And the sad truth is that of those 44% of boys who 41% are being raped by women, 4 times more likely to perpetrate a rape. These boys are 4 times more likely to perpetrate a rape. When we look at the stats, are they going up or are they going down? I think in most countries, gender-based violence, sexual abuse, rape, it's just escalating. It goes up year on year and year on year. So the interventions that we're currently using are useless. They're not working, ladies and gentlemen. What's the definition of insanity? It's bashing your head against the wall, hoping for a different outcome. We keep doing the same old, same old. We keep blaming men for everything that's wrong in the world, right? And I don't want to get into this whole gender war. I'm not into that. I mean, but we keep blaming one gender for something that's a human problem. It's not a gender issue. It is a human problem. And we need to start talking about it and telling the truth, because if we don't, we will never heal the problem. You cannot fix gender-based violence, sexual abuse, or rape when you're only talking to half the victims. We need to include everybody, and we need to be specific about the genders as well. I hope this is a bit of an insight for you guys. And it's difficult to run an organization like this because funding is just very rare for male issues. In South Africa, I know in Canada, there are only 7 organizations, I think, that support male victims of sexual abuse. In America, there's probably about 20 or so, but they don't get funding. They really struggle for funding. And we need to start talking about these things. We need to start changing the narrative. We need to start including all victims, because I know that as a man who was raped and sexually abused up until the age of 19, right? When I got married, I took that suppressed anger and I let it out at home. At home was the one place I could be real, and that impacted on my family. It impacted on my daughter. It impacted on my ex-wife. It really negatively impacted on my family. So let's start talking about these things. Let's start talking about being real and supporting men through all the issues that they're going through. I know as an organization, we've taken a stance that from this year on, we're busy developing a mental health app for men. And hopefully that is going to be able to bring in some funding. In 12 years of running this organization, we've had probably about 220,000 Rand in funding. That's nothing. That if we break that down to dollars, it's probably about $20,000. That's how dismal it is. And that's what we've been allowed to help treat men and support men. So, please remember that boys and girls are victims, but let's not start with this gender neutral term, children. The other thing we need to get real about is that as female perpetrators, I counsel so many female victims who've been raped by women. And it's only because I tell my story that they begin to go, hey, but I was also raped by a woman. And it begins a path of healing that wasn't open to them before, because Nobody ever talks about it. Let's get real. It's a human problem, not a gender issue. And honestly, we need to really start talking about this in truth and being brutally honest with the nation so that everybody can be included in the healing process, that we can create safe spaces for all victims, so that we can create change, effective change. Join us in this struggle, and join us in changing the narrative so that we can actually make an impact on ending gender-based violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, rape. I hope you all join us in this struggle. Thank you for this opportunity, and I hope you guys gained something from what I've been talking about. And chat to you soon.
Our first question. So what are some advices that you would give male survivors or victims who have been struggling to overcome their trauma? Very wise words, John Michael, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, John, I agree with you 100% there with the physical responses. I think the guilt that I lived with, the fact that I got erect when people were touching me, my brain was going, this is disgusting. Why are they doing this? And then they use that in part to groom you as well. They say, look, your body's responding. You do like it, you see. It creates a lot of confusion in a teenager's mind, And but for men, this is such a deep topic. It really is, and we manifest the abuse in our bodies in so many different ways. For some reason, I manifest a lot of stress in my body on the right-hand side of my body. Why? I don't know. So I'm always having, at my young age, issues with my knee, with my prostate. Of course, that's understandable because of what happened. Right side of my mouth as well. I tend to clench just the right side of my body. I don't know why. And it's these things that there's so many different indicators that your body's trying to tell you, listen, there's a problem. You need to deal with this. And it's trying to wake you up, going like, come on, there's an issue here and you need to look at it. And it's very difficult. And I'm currently going through Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, which is an amazing book, which has really opened my eyes and to a lot of different things in life. But for men, it is an issue because we never talk about it. And it makes it harder. And I was just so lucky. I happened to come home early from work one day, and my ex-wife was sitting there watching the Oprah Winfrey Show, and she said, I think you should watch this. I had never told her that I was a victim of abuse. I had never told anybody, as far as I can remember. But then again, I was an alcoholic, so I probably blurted it out in some silly drunken point in my life, And she said, watch this. And I watched Tyler Perry and 200 Men, many of whom are friends of mine today, talking about their abuse. And, my brain still denied it. That's the funny thing. My brain kept saying, no, that's not you. Unless somebody said something that related to my story 100%, I was like, nah, that's not me. That didn't happen to me. That didn't happen to me. It was right at the end when one of the guys stood up and he says, and I want to say to the fathers out there, you love your children too much, you will never hurt them. And that punched me in the gut like you cannot believe. Because I remember my daughter must have been 2.5, 3. I can't remember what age it was, but she was still in nappies, let's put it that way. So it must have been younger than 3 at least, because I'm a pretty bad dad if my daughter's 3 and she's still in nappies. But and I would change her nappies and I would look at her, and this war started in my head. The little devil that comes up on your shoulder from the cartoon characters, right? He would say, oh, you're going to hurt her. You're going to stick your finger in her. And then a little angel will come up here and go, no, you're not. You love her too much. And I would have genuinely this war happening in my head. And I was like, what the hell? And when one of the 200 men stood up and said, you will never hurt your children because you love them too much, that was it. That was, for me, that was the sudden revelation. And I always equate the story, I say, it was like a giant stood behind me and lifted a 1-ton weight off my shoulders. And for the first time in my life, and I was 43, 44 at the time, I could actually breathe. For the first time in my life, I could take a full breath. So that's how the stress constricts your body to such an extent that you can't even breathe properly. So, for men out there, all I can say is that survivors that are brave enough and tough enough, like John, like myself, like the two other guys that have been on before, if we can just keep voicing our stories, just keep telling your stories, because somebody is going to find a similarity, and that is going to give them permission to start the healing journey, just like it did me, just like it did John. I'm sure somebody said something to you at some point where you were like, oh yeah, that's me. And it's such a relief, and so survivor led, sorry, it's been a long day. Survivor led stories are so important and vital to the healing of other people, and we must just keep telling those stories. It's so important.
Thank you so much, Martin and John Michael, for that. And I would just like to add that in the research that I had done, there is actually a dedicated section to these answers. So by survivors, for survivors. And you can actually find this in the handout. And I'll just highlight a couple of things. I would like for survivors and victims to really challenge the self-blame, to remember that it is not their fault for the abuse, and to place the responsibility where it truly lies, on the abuser, on the exploiter, and on the trafficker. It is not on the victim. As well, to be patient with yourself. Healing takes time. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small, and remember that you are not alone on this journey. And the last thing I want to highlight is to practice self-care and prioritize your well-being through activities that bring you joy.
Yeah, of course. Something that John said.
Of course. Well. Go ahead.
Your body responding, and I've had a lot of ladies that I've counseled come to me and they say they're so ashamed because their bodies responded. Some of them orgasmed, some of them lubricated. And I always explain it in the simplest way possible. And I say it's the tickle effect, right? It could be a total stranger pushes you down onto the couch and starts tickling you. You're going to start laughing because it's a bodily response. It's just a reaction to being tickled. As much as you hate it happening, you laugh, isn't it? And this is the same thing in rape situations, in grooming situations with boys, with girls. It's your body's natural response to that stimulation, wanted or unwanted, and you are going to respond. It's no reflection on you as a person. It's no reflection on I wanted, I didn't want it, or whatever the case may be. It's just a natural response that happens, and your body's programmed that way. In fact, it's a defense mechanism. Because you can imagine how much damage would be done if you're a lady and you were raped, and so just bear that in mind. It's never your fault. This is the thing. It's just not your fault. So our biggest issue with female perpetrated sexual abuse is that we've bought into the narrative, right? We've bought into the narrative that it's only men. It's only men that rape, and it's only women that are victims. So, I mean, the first thing we need to do as frontline workers is change our perceptions. In my country, it's pretty easy. 50% of the children that walk into any emergency ward in the country are essentially victims of abuse. Done, dusted. It's as easy as that. And I think we need to embark on a training program for frontline workers and say to them, listen, these are the stats. This is what's happening. And essentially, just about every second kid that walks into your emergency, I would go so far as to say any child that walks into the emergency room, because generally, kids act out in weird ways to end up. I heard a beautiful story where this young boy broke into a house and he just sat in the lounge and the alarm was going off, and he just sat there. He didn't run away. He didn't attempt to steal anything. And the police arrived there and they went, Tom, it's you again, And that's what he wanted. He wanted that recognition. The police at least knew his name. And he just wanted that attention. And I think kids that walk into emergency rooms also kind of end up there because they want attention, because they're not getting what they need and what they require at home. So as frontline workers, I'm maybe because of my history, I start off with this kid is probably a victim of abuse, and then I eliminate from there. I start off from that basis and I eliminate from there. And just asking very open questions, just being honest, not trying to force a narrative on the child, just asking Do you feel safe? Do you feel secure? Do you feel happy at home? Those sort of questions, and then just never rule out the fact that it could be the mother. As Enna's researchers pointed to, most of the victims, or female perpetrators, is in fact the mother who's led it, as in my history as well. I hope that answered some questions.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that.
Very, very interesting point, John. And this is to doctors, right? The doctors need to start understanding that illness is wedged in trauma. Done. It's one of those things. I mean, there's enough research when we look at adverse childhood experiences to tell us that children that have suffered prolonged trauma in their lives are more likely to develop cancers, more likely to develop ischemic heart disease, more likely to suffer depression. Suicidality goes up by 1,400%. I mean, it's ridiculous. The numbers are huge, and one of the biggest tellers of childhood trauma is in fact gut problems, right? Indigestion, bloating, flatulence, all that sort of stuff. And it's the biggest teller because the largest nerve running from the base of the skull down to the body is called the vagus nerve, and that is the nerve that controls your digestion, controls your heart rate, controls your kidney functions, and all that sort of stuff. And when you suffer trauma, you tense up, you stress because you're living in that fight-flight all the time, and your body stresses, your neck moves forward, and it impinges on your vagus nerve. So your digestion is impacted. And I was chatting to a mate of mine who's a specialist GP, and he said, I can see it when they come into my rooms, and because he's informed and we talk a lot and he understands these things, he says, I can see when kids have been traumatized because they suffer indigestion, they suffer bloating and all that sort of thing. And he says, for me, that's the start. And he gets to a point where actually with his older clients, he starts directing them towards psychological therapy instead of medical treatment. So let's steer away from the medicine. Let's start talking about what happened in your childhood. Of course, a lot of people aren't open to doing that, but very valid point, John. It's our doctors should be highly aware of this. It's a huge tell.
So I would just like to add that the biases that we have against male survivors will also dismiss female victims as well that have been facing that as well. So let's go into the third question, which is, tell us about your work and anything that you would like to highlight.
Great. I mean, John, I'm holding up my book. My book's called The Pumpkin Van. It will be published in the next 2 months. So yeah, I've been working on it for 7.5 years. But anyway, it's going to get done. In South Africa, what we do is I find my main task is that I raise awareness about male survivors of sexual abuse and talk about it. And that's kind of the main goal that I have set. We also run groups throughout the country, recovery groups for male survivors. They're in-person groups that we run through a program that was done by the Adult Survivors of Childhood Abuse in the States, ASCA. We've had great success. It's such a delight to watch people's lives transform right before your eyes as they suddenly start getting it and seeing how everything interconnects and how life works out for them. And it was just so nice to watch people. Still nice to watch people's lives change completely. And that's kind of what we do. We're launching a mental health app in the next couple of months as well. What we've done is we have a support line for men, staffed by men. We've trained male counselors. We find it kind of, men just open up on certain topics easier with other men. And there's so many organizations here, but 85% of the counselors are female. So it becomes a bit daunting for men to contact those. And then I think the fourth question, there was the Canadian groups. I know there's one that's called Men and Healing. There are several. I'm not too afraid. I know I've done some studying through Men and Healing, and the great organization. Just try Rick. Rick is the guy that heads it up. Rick Goodwin. Yeah, Rick Goodwin does awesome work. Really great man. And so you can contact them as well. And as for me, I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity. I'm really delighted to see so many people from Africa in these groups. Fantastic. And you guys can hit me up on MatrixMen. Just search our website and email me. And let's see if we can work together and start healing men in Africa. That would be a fantastic cause. So I see we have from Nairobi, DRC, Malawi. Wow, lovely. Indians also have very high rates of male perpetration, by the way, close to South Africa, probably close on 44%. Very, very, very high, and many, many, many female perpetrators, believe it or not. I've counseled guys from India, and every single one of them have been victimized by women. But yeah, it was great to meet everybody. And John, nice to meet you in person, so to speak.